Hello, and welcome to episode number 11. Ironically, the Carson Wentz episode of The Checkdown, brought to you by The Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half, and you can follow me on Twitter at halfandhalf_TPL. Make sure you follow the Painted Lines account and smash that subscribe button on both YouTube and give us a follow on Twitch as we launch a new Twitch channel. And so let's get into it. Carson Wentz has been traded to the Indianapolis Colts. In 2017, I was let go from a job that I loved for some financial reasons. And so I moved across the state and took a new job in 2019, and I was asked to resign from that job 2 years later in favor of somebody else. Thinking back to that time, I really started to doubt myself because I couldn't deal with it. And so I started to deflect that doubt onto others, and eventually I ended up changing careers because of those events that were in my past. Now, why do I tell you that? Well, it's because Carson Wentz wants out of Philadelphia. And why does he want out? Well, if we think back through his career, in 2017, Carson Wentz, in his second year in the league, was in the middle of an MVP caliber season, and he tears his ACL in a freak injury against the Rams. And he sees his backup, Nick Foles, come in and lead the team to the Super Bowl. He's a Super Bowl MVP. He wins the first Super Bowl Philadelphia has ever won, and they build a statue to him in the parking lot. In 2018, Wentz comes back, and he pushes himself. He comes back earlier than he should have maybe, and he struggles. And then he gets benched. Well, he doesn't get benched. He gets a back injury, and Foles comes in and leads the team to the playoffs again. Think about the monkey that would be on your back after that. And so he comes out in 2019 and he stays injury-free. And he makes it to the playoff with no help from his offensive skill players at all. And then he gets a concussion on a dirty hit in the first quarter of his first playoff game in his fourth season. And so you come into the 2020 offseason thinking about that. And then you see in 2020, after you drug a team of nobodies to the playoffs, you see the Eagles prioritize Javon Hargrave in free agency. You see him spend a prime pick, a second rounder, on a Heisman Trophy candidate quarterback. What are you going to think about that? And then 2020 starts, and there's offensive line turnover, and you have Marquise Goodwin opts out, Alshon Jeffrey's always hurt, Jalen Reagor's hurt. There's just nothing there. And so Wentz begins to doubt. And what does he do? He channels that doubt into blaming other people. He starts to press. And now he gets to a point where he's benched and it's everybody's fault but his own. And he needs to take ownership for that. But having been in a situation like that, I can sympathize. It's a lot easier to point the finger outwardly. So Wentz wants out because of a litany of failures. This is a massive organizational failure. I'm not here to blame Wentz or Howie or Doug or Jeffrey Lurie. I'm here to blame everybody. They all bear fault. Wentz didn't play within himself. He's hesitant to listen to coaching. He doesn't like critique. Howie has built a terrible team around Carson Wentz. He's done a horrible job with draft capital and free agent signings. Doug Peterson is the head coach. It is his responsibility to manage his quarterback's ego, and he didn't do it. I blame Jeffrey Lurie. He allowed this to happen. The point is, they all bear fault. But Carson Wentz wanted and needed a change of scenery. And so that's what he gets today. And we'll get to the compensation in just a moment. You know, he gets the third round pick this year, a second round pick that's conditional, could become a first next year. And I've seen a lot of people upset about it on social media, and I get it. But at the same time, we called for him to be benched. He played that bad. And so what do you think a quarterback that you wanted benched is worth? So I dug into some stats. We like to talk about how good 2019 was, and 2020 was just an anomaly. But the question is, was it? And so I looked into some analytics, and when you look at danger plays, which is categorized by the number of times the quarterback puts the ball in danger, in 2019, Wentz had 45 danger plays, which ranked 5th in the league. In 2020, he had 42, which also ranked 5th in the league despite not playing the final 4 games. When you look at interceptable passes, Wentz ranked 11th in the league in 2019 and second in the league in 2020, again, despite not playing the last 4 games. This season, his red zone completion percentage was 44th among all quarterbacks in the NFL. In 2019, it was 18th, which isn't nearly as bad, but that's still in the bottom half of quarterbacks. It's below average. And we can point to the offensive line, but when we look at the clean pocket completion percentage, his clean pocket percentage was 67% this season. That's 36th in the NFL. That's terrible. And a year ago, it was only 13th in the NFL. And so it was better, but again, it's average. What is an average NFL quarterback on a big salary that has some tendencies of being a diva really worth? In 2018, Carson Wentz was graded 14th among quarterbacks by PFF. He was graded 14th in 2019 and 31st in 2020. The reason I bring all that up is not to smear Carson Wentz, but it's simply to point out that Carson Wentz hasn't been an above average quarterback since he was injured in 2017. And so the Colts are taking a gamble here. The Colts are gambling that they can fix Carson Wentz. They can get him back to 2017. And there's some connections there. Frank Reich was his offensive coordinator in 2017. Press Taylor is now an offensive assistant there, was his quarterback's coach this year. I do find it ironic that the Eagles just hired like half of the Colts coaching staff, but then they dealt Carson Wentz to Indianapolis. So we get the 3rd round pick this year, a second that can become a first next year. The condition, as reported by Mike Garafolo, however you say his name, is that Carson Wentz has to play 75% of the snaps next season and it becomes a first round pick. Or if he plays 70% of the snaps and the Colts make the playoffs. Now, you might say that's not likely, but I would say that Carson Wentz has proven that he's not injury prone. We have the freak ACL in 2017. We have the back injury stemming from that in 2018, but in 2019, Wentz played healthy. In 2020, Wentz was healthy. And so I'm not concerned about him not playing the snap. The only way he doesn't play 75% of the snaps is a freak injury or if he's truly awful. And if he's truly awful enough to get benched, I mean, you're looking at a very high 2nd round pick. And so you're looking at a late 1st or a 2nd round pick in next year's draft. And I think that's fair compensation, especially given the circumstances that everyone knew that Wentz wants out. And so what does this do to the salary cap? Well, the Eagles are going to take on a record amount of dead cap. $33.8 million on the cap next year in dead money for Carson Wentz. That shatters the previous high set by the Rams just a couple weeks ago when they traded Jared Goff, and it breaks it by $11.6 million. It's a phenomenal amount of dead cap, and it's again a massive organizational failure that got you to this point. And so the Eagles are going to save a little under $1 million in 2021. But they will be free and clear of the Carson Wentz contract in 2022, saving over $25 million. So what are my thoughts on this trade? Well, first of all, I think it's important that we realize 2021 is going to be a terrible season. But not because of this trade. It was always going to be a terrible season. The Eagles are massively over the cap. They're going to have to shed a lot of contracts. And to be frank, there's not young talent on this roster. So this was always going to be a bad season. A lot of people are upset about, the picks being next year. All we got this year is a 3rd year. But if you already know 2021 is going to be bad, does it matter? We're falling into this trap of thinking that picks next year are less valuable than picks this year. And that's not the case. They're just further down the road. And so this gives you a chance to have 2 first-round picks in the 2022 draft, which will be a safer draft. You're not going to have prospects opt out of the 2021 college season because of COVID. You're going to have a combine. The Eagles aren't in the position to afford to be risky with their compensation from drafts. That this team needs sure things. And so by getting a potential first-round pick next season, I think that's a slam dunk. And beyond that, you're going to have a lot of cap space. And so you're going to have a terrible 2021. You're going to go into 2022 with 2 first-round picks and a lot of cap space. You could turn this team around in the 2022 offseason. So what are the Eagles going to do now at pick number 6? Wentz is gone. Jalen Hurts is the only quarterback on the roster. I think there's 2 paths that the Eagles can take. One would be to build around Jalen Hurts. Take a playmaker at number 6 or trade back, build around Jalen Hurts and see what he has in 2021. If he's terrible, you're probably sitting in the top 10 to 12 in next year's draft, and maybe you look at a quarterback then. You'll have 2 first-rounders. You could probably trade up and get your guy. Option number 2 would be to let the draft come to you, and if there's a quarterback you like at 2, whether it be Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, or Trey Lance, you take him. Because if you're not sure you have a quarterback and there's one there, you should take the guy if you believe in him. And make no mistake, the Eagles believed they had a franchise quarterback in Carson Wentz, and they spent the 53rd pick in the draft last year on Jalen Hurts. If they're not sure that Hurts is their guy, they will absolutely consider a quarterback at number 6. And so it just depends on which way you want to play it. I could see it going either way. Let's talk about Wentz, though, for a moment. Wentz is going to be a better player in Indianapolis. He's just going to be. It's a fresh start, more stable offensive line. It's that change of scenery we talked about. How much better will he be? I don't know. I would not place money on him ever returning to 2017 form. Can he be a top 13, 14 quarterback in the league? I think he could be. But I think that elite amount of talent, I don't think that's coming back. The Colts are betting that it will. And so just to step back from evaluating, just thinking about the Carson Wentz era in Philadelphia. In 2016, I started covering the team. I started writing for a blog that had 2 viewers. Thanks, Mom and Dad. But it was an exciting time to be an Eagles fan, getting in at the start of a new era. And it was fun. 2017 was just phenomenal, beyond my wildest dreams. My wife and I were out of the country when Carson Wentz was injured. We were in Nigeria completing an adoption of our daughter. And I'll never forget waking up in the middle of the night to go check on the game because, I couldn't watch it over there. And I saw that the Eagles won and we clinched the division, and just this surge of emotion. And then looking at the stats and seeing Nick Foles played and getting confused because I knew it wasn't that much of a blowout. And then skimming down to the recap and seeing he was injured, and I was devastated. Never experienced that swing of emotions so quick. Coming back and thinking we had no chance to make a run in the playoffs, much less win the Super Bowl. And then it was one of the most magical moments of my sports life. Watching the Philly special, watching Nick Foles out-duel Tom Brady. 2018 was brutal. Wentz rushed back. He was up and down, and mostly down at the end. As we found out later, he was playing with a fractured back. But to see Nick Foles come in again and lead him to the playoffs, and I knew at that moment there could be some issues. But in 2019, Wentz comes back, and he really drug a struggling offense to the playoffs. Became the first quarterback in NFL history to throw for 4,000 yards without having a 500-yard receiver. It was like Superman. And then in 2020, watching the wheels come off, it was tough. I've never felt more devastated sports-wise than I did watching Carson Wentz go to the locker room in 2019. Literally felt sick. It's a culmination of injury, bad drafting, gross mismanagement by the Eagles, and it's where we are now. And we're headed into some dark times. 2021 will be a difficult season, but there is hope on the horizon. And that hope on the horizon comes in the 2022 offseason when the Eagles are sitting with 2 first-round picks and a tremendous amount of cap space. If they use it wisely, it could bring this team back from the precipice. That's going to do it for episode number 11 of The Checkdown. Those are my thoughts on Carson Wentz, the trade, the status of the Eagles. I'd love to know what you think. So if you're watching on YouTube, drop a comment down in the comment section. You can @ me on Twitter. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But make sure you subscribe on YouTube and you follow us on Twitch so you don't miss the next episode. Until next time.
recording.